Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if that breakthrough treatment for depression is as amazing as it sounds, or if there might be more to the story? Well, today we're diving into some fascinating new analysis that asks just that. So, you've probably heard about psilocybin, the compound found in magic mushrooms, and its potential to help with depression. A big review came out recently looking at a bunch of studies, and it suggested that psilocybin really does a good job of reducing depression symptoms. The original analysis seemed pretty solid, saying there was a strong positive effect. But here is where things get interesting. The researchers who looked at this data again wanted to dig a little deeper, especially when it comes to something called publication bias. What is publication bias? Think of it like this: scientists are more likely to publish studies that show a positive result, a result that shows their treatment works. Studies that show no effect or a negative effect might get stuck in a drawer, never seeing the light of day. This can make a treatment look more effective than it really is because we're only seeing the good news stories. The original study checked for this bias, but the test they used wasn't very powerful, especially with a smaller number of studies. It also couldn't tell us how much bias there might be or give us a corrected estimate. So, our current researchers decided to use a different tool. They used something called a Robust Bayesian Meta-Analysis, or RoBMA. This is a pretty cool method because it can look at the evidence for a treatment effect, how much the results vary between studies, and also figure out if there is publication bias happening all at the same time. It is like having a superpowered detective for research data. They use the exact same data from the original review, so it is a direct comparison. What did they find? Well, it has definitely changed the picture a bit. They found moderate evidence that there is publication bias in the studies looking at psilocybin for depression. This means that some studies might not have been published, potentially making the treatment seem better than it is. When they accounted for this potential bias, the effect of psilocybin was actually smaller than what was originally reported. The published effect size was around 0.9. But after their analysis, the bias-corrected effect was closer to 0.53. That is about a 41% reduction. And importantly, the new range of possible effects, their credible interval, now includes 0. This means that while there still might be a positive effect, the evidence for a strong certain effect is less clear. It doesn't completely dismiss the original findings, but it suggests there is more uncertainty than we initially thought. Now, the really interesting part is figuring out why this bias signal might be there. The researchers did some digging and looked at different types of studies. They found that when they excluded studies that were open-label, meaning participants knew they were getting psilocybin, the evidence for publication bias went down significantly. They also looked at excluding a single study that had an unusually large effect, what they call an outlier, and that also reduced the bias signal. This suggests that the bias might be coming from the difficulty of truly blinding participants in these kinds of studies. Since psilocybin can have noticeable effects, it is hard to make sure everyone doesn't know who is getting the actual drug and who is getting a placebo. This can lead to what is called expectancy effects, where people experience a benefit simply because they expect to feel better from the treatment. It doesn't seem to be about studies that are genuinely showing good results being completely hidden away, but more about the challenges of study design and how those might influence the reported effects. They also looked at studies that measure depression using yes or no outcomes, like remission or response. For remission, the bias-corrected effect was still positive, and for response, it was also positive. But again, the numbers were a bit smaller than originally presented. They even did a more complex analysis looking at multiple measurements over time within the same studies. This multi-level analysis showed a very strong signal for publication bias and an effect size that was very close to 0. However, they note this part of the analysis is more exploratory, meaning it is an early look and needs more investigation. So, what is the big takeaway here? This new analysis doesn't say that psilocybin definitely doesn't work for depression. There is still moderate evidence that it does. But it does tell us that the original estimate of how well it works might have been a bit too optimistic, possibly due to a combination of publication bias and expectancy effects from the study designs themselves. The uncertainty around the true effect is greater than the first analysis suggested. The researchers recommend that methods like RoBMA should be used more often in future research updates. It is a good way to double-check findings and get a more realistic picture. It seems the challenge with psilocybin research isn't necessarily hiding bad studies, but managing the psychological effects of knowing you are on a potentially powerful drug, which can influence how people report feeling. From my perspective, this is why critical analysis of research is so important. Science is a process, and sometimes new tools and perspectives help us refine our understanding. This study isn't saying psilocybin is a bust, but it is a crucial reminder that we need to be careful about how we interpret study results, especially when dealing with complex psychological treatments. It highlights the need for even more rigorous study designs in the future, perhaps exploring novel ways to blind participants or to specifically account for the powerful role of expectation in mental health treatments. Future research could focus on replicating these findings with even larger datasets and exploring methods to mitigate expectancy effects in clinical trials of psychedelics. What do you think about this? Does it change how you view the research on psilocybin for depression? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to RuBIN'S Mind Lab for more science explained simply. And hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.